I'm Leandro Perez, Vice President of Marketing for Salesforce Asia Pacific, and welcome to the Salesforce Executive Series, where you will hear from Salesforce global executives on their perspectives and experience working with thought leaders and the C-suite across the globe on how to navigate our times and more. Let's have some fun.
I'm already on record.
Where'd you get this idea, Leandro? JSD said it.
Mini Craig says, good to see you as well.
Can I shut off the recording?
Yes, let's do that.
What are we doing to help the larger population move up and forward? And making sure that when we talk about representation matters, it really does matter, right? So we want to level the playing field so all folks have an opportunity.
Today I'm excited to welcome Craig Cuffie, Executive Vice President and Chief Procurement Officer at Salesforce. In his role, Craig provides directional leadership and strategic management for the purchase, procurement, and acquisition of all contractual services. Before joining Salesforce, Craig founded Eagle Island Advisors, a boutique private equity firm. He's also held a number of leadership positions, including VP of Global Operations at Jawbone and Chief Procurement Officer at Clearwire. Craig, it's been such a long time. Where are you joining us from today?
I'm in a little town called Pacific Grove on the Monterey Peninsula. Great little place to spend the pandemic.
So what's going on in San Francisco? Have you been back into the office at all?
I've not been back into the office. I've been pretty much hunkered down here in Pacific Grove. I've been up to the city several times. I mean, it's beginning to open up and it looks good. I haven't had a need, right, to be in the office. And many folks want to be in the office. As you know, we're beginning to open up around the globe, but very, very slowly and in concert with the local laws and the local jurisdictions.
That is interesting. I feel like it was basically 2 years ago that we saw each other, and in the middle of the time, then, lots happened. So it's very, very interesting times indeed we live in.
It was the week before Christmas, 2019. That's when we last saw each other. So that's been a long, long time.
Wow. And in Salesforce years, that is a long time. Great.
It's about 7 years in Salesforce time. That's what it feels like.
Oh, gosh. So, Craig, the pandemic has affected leaders in many different ways, in fact. Dare I say we've all had to pivot a few different times. What are some of the ways in which you and your team have had to adapt?
We shut down the offices pretty much overnight, right? We went to, sort of a soft close where we said, you can go back in and get your stuff, right? You can go back in and get your chair, maybe get your monitor. And then not long after that, we went to, the offices are closed, right? And so my team, the whole company, all of finance had to pivot like almost overnight. Now we all work from home from time to time, but this is an extended period of work from home, right? Or work from anywhere, or success from anywhere. I remember, like for me, the funniest thing is, so the house I'm in is a bit of a vacation house, which is how we've used it for the last, 5 of the 7 years that we've owned it. And all of a sudden, I realized I didn't have a chair, right? I was sitting in a dining room chair at this little desk, and by Thursday of that first week, my backside was really, really sore. My back really hurt. I didn't feel great. So that's Monday to Thursday, and I ran out to a local office supply store and bought the first chair I saw. So just to have something to sit in to get through the week. That was one challenge. The next week, my Wi-Fi wouldn't work because all of a sudden, all the schools were closed as well, right? So everyone was home trying to figure out what to do. Home learning hadn't really started in earnest, but when it did, it really used a bunch of that bandwidth in this little town that I live in. From a work standpoint, you just think about it. We shut down in March. Our fiscal year starts Feb 1, so that's Q1. The end of our first quarter is April, and we closed the books completely remotely. I mean, we had a bang-up quarter, as we know, and we closed the books, and we did this with largely our entire team, the company, working remotely. So we proved the model, right? So all of the collaboration tools that we have and employ across the company and other companies like ours, we actually put them to the test, and they were quite successful. I mean, there are some kinks, but by and large, we ran and have been running the business for 18 months from anywhere.
It's truly incredible, and I don't want to underestimate how big that change of closing the books virtually was, because it's one of those functions that you have historically been in the office, right? So there's probably little things you didn't think about that happened that couldn't be normally done virtually, but you realize you could, right? It's very, very interesting.
Well, what I call it's the drive-by, right? So walk out of my office in the Salesforce East and walk down the hallway, and you'd have all these pickup conversations about important issues that, be it close or something else. I mean, for me, I'm not as involved in closing the books as I am in closing the quarter. It's just the nature of the beast of procurement. But then there's things I help the controller's office and others do as we actually do close the book. That being said, it's that those drive-by conversations about little issues, and I go, oh my goodness, I literally have to pick up the phone and call someone. I've got to send them a text. I have to send them an email. And when you're working from anywhere, in this case, working from home, most of us were dealing with all the distractions that come with working from home. And so it became, you had to train yourself to be able to do that, right? You have to train your family that, you actually are doing something. You're not playing video games, right? There's no Fortnite on your work computer. So it's a different way of working, but we all had to learn how to do that for an extended period of time.
It is very interesting. I guess it's probably the most that humans in the workplace have had to change in such a short amount of time than ever, right? Ever since we did move into the office and the Industrial Revolution. It's very, very interesting. So I guess if I think about that now and pull that thread a little bit, so what does success from anywhere mean to you now, right? We've been in this for some time. And what are the changes that are being asked by you? You're part of the finance team. CFO obviously is overlooking the organization for many of our listeners. What does that mean?
Well, you get very deliberate about your contact and your collaboration. I think the first thing, before we talk about the work itself, you talk about your team. So what are you doing for your team? What are you doing with your team? It's really, really hard, right? Because all of a sudden, at least with those of your team who are in the same physical location, you had contact. And then if you look at the demographics of the company, we have a lot of folks who are younger than me. And so you have multi-generations inside the office, inside the company, and they need to be talked to and worked with and heard in different ways. So you got to figure that out. That's real important. And oh, by the way, when you tie all that together, it's about connection. So where and how are you connecting? We went from a monthly all hands to a weekly all hands, right? So that we could see everyone. My children are all grown and out of the house, but I remember when they were all at university, it was a matter of, when FaceTime was new, we FaceTime them just so we could see them, to see if they're healthy, if they're well, if they're eating. It's no different with your employees, right? You want to see them and see how they're doing and talk to them and laugh at them a little bit. We did something that I had never done before, right, in my career. We built this all hands, and then we finished, and it wasn't a bunch of work talk. It was like kind of topical, what's going on, what's happening with the pandemic. But we ended it with a meditation, right? We would have a quiet 10 or 15-minute meditation at the end of it. And I'm telling you, that was probably the most powerful thing I've ever done as a senior leader, as a leader, period, in my total work career, was working with a team and then taking them through that shared experience, like we do at La Lima, right, and other events in the company. But doing that at a group or a function level was quite powerful. Many folks got a lot out of it. It was really cool.
No, and it's something that I think about with my team, and I know many of the leaders I talk to as well. It is that resilience, that change in the way we work, and how do you maintain that connection. I guess beyond the team itself and their health, are there any changes you're putting in place to how things get done in the department, or you're being asked to do things differently?
We are still, if you go back to our former CFO, Mark Hawkins, better, never done. I mean, that's even more important, right? Because I think we talked earlier, you think about the community inside a physical space. How do you have that same conversation, right? It's hard to do. So you have to figure out another way to do that. The other thing is the work itself. Does the work, as you think about it, happening a lot of it in a location, now that it's distributed, right? Still on computers, but distributed, and someone may not be able to go, hey, what about so-and-so? Hey, what about so-and-so? What do you think? Have you seen that? You have to be very, very deliberate, right, about the reaching out and making sure the work gets done. Oh, by the way, work doesn't go away, right? And so the improvements are still demanded from the business, and we are growing, as you know, Leandro. We're growing at better than 20% a year over the last several years, and we believe that we'll continue to do so. So we had to find as a company, right, a different way of working. What was really cool, I was in a one-on-one with one of my leaders today on our P2P procure to pay transformation project. Small and mighty team, and she said, we were all weekend, right? So they all got about 4 hours of sleep the last 2 weekends on this project, in one really getting to know each other, and it's really a very big project, but done completely from the comfort or discomfort of their own homes. That's huge. And we have delivered many, many business projects and continue to run the business largely that way. So we have, a couple of hundred people on a regular basis that can now access our HQ office in San Francisco. But I don't imagine, and I would be welcome to be proved wrong, that we have seen an entire team, right? An entire team show up to work together. There have been some leadership teams, right? For offsites, we now have, as Amy says, we have on-site offsites. So instead of flying around the globe and having meeting at cool locations like parts of New Jersey where I grew up, we go to the building, right? And we have an on-site offsite because it has for those of you who have an opportunity to get to San Francisco and get to Salesforce Tower, it's kind of hard to beat the 40-mile view, right, from the top of Salesforce Tower. So it's a very cool place to have an offsite, on-site.
No, I love that. And I also love, it's probably one of my favorite taglines from Mark Hawkins, our former CFO, better, better, never done. Truly a mantra for many of us to live by. Now, I guess pulling a little further there, we know that the pandemic and these changes are not necessarily impacting everyone equally. And I know you're quite passionate about diversity and inclusion. You oversee actually our supplier diversity initiatives at Salesforce, I know. Can you tell us a little bit about, how you think about that and, how you approach that at Salesforce?
Thanks, Leandro. Yes, diversity and inclusion is, a passion. And it's not a passion project, it's a passion and it's a reality. One of the things that I do and I'm very, very happy with at the company is running our supplier diversity program. And as you know, with the killing of George Floyd last year, we started something called the Racial Equality and Justice Task Force. It's built on a model that was provided to us by Melody Hobson in a conversation. She had 3 Ps: people, purchasing, and philanthropy. We added a 4th P, policy, because we have stepped up as a company on either policies inside states, laws inside states, legislation pending that was completely orthogonal to our values. So I run the purchasing pillar. We have 4 pillars. We have 4 executives who chair this task force. And so we've moved away from counting spend to counting impact. And what I mean by impact, what are we doing in the communities that we live in? What are we doing in the communities that we work in? What are we doing to help the larger population move up and forward? And making sure that when we talk about representation matters, it really does matter, right? So we want to level the playing field so all folks have an opportunity.
Super, super impressive. And maybe, Craig, can you sort of unpack that or double click? Like, what are a couple of examples that we've done just so for our audience here to understand the changes that are being made?
So we looked at, I'm a finance executive, or at least I play one on TV for today. So I'm a finance executive. And if you say, what are we spending with diverse suppliers? So we look at, I manage billions and billions of dollars to spend. How much of that are we spending with diverse suppliers? What's the criteria to be a diverse supplier? I also happen to sit on the national board of a group called the NMSDC. That's the board that actually certifies minority-owned and women-owned businesses. And so that kind of helps. But looking at that data set and understanding who's in there, what are the categories that we're spending on, and establishing a baseline and then taking it up another notch. And we go public with these numbers, right? So it's hundreds of millions of dollars, and I keep pushing my team for more, number one. That's one way. Another way, which we've done very recently, is we've looked at a set of small businesses and said, what's the biggest problem that small businesses have? It's actually getting paid. So our standard payment terms are 60 days, right? So for those of you who C-levels who do business with us, that's our I control payment terms. That is in my remit as a chief procurement officer. And so for a group of businesses that meet a certain criteria, there are small businesses, and the criteria is important because there are certain laws you have to comply with. We pay them in 15 days because the most important thing to a small business, based on my 10 years in Intuit, years ago, is getting paid. It's cash. Cash flow is king, right? And so that's really important. Another thing that we've done is we created a mentorship program. So we've just launched our first cohort. It's 35 executives like myself inside of Salesforce, and the demand was overwhelming. We had 3 times that demand of people wanting to come into the program. Executives like myself in Salesforce, we can only accommodate 35. So we have 35 businesses that we've vetted. And for a year, these executives will work with that small business owner and help them grow their businesses, right? Help them grow. And that's absolutely huge. On top of that, we have partnered with, as I said earlier, the NMSDC, WeBank, which is a Women in Business group, and others, right, to make sure that we are there. We show up. We're helpful anywhere from, donated software to donated executive time to real hard checks to support these entities.
Oh, it's so incredible, and truly, I imagine rewarding work, Craig. I'm inspired myself to see the things that are happening, and I guess I would ask for folks listening to trying to think about how they might bring this to their organization, because, like you said, historically it's all about spend, right, and where that dollar's going, and maybe sometimes it isn't the cheapest option. How can they get started, and maybe what advice would you give there?
Well, there's a ton at the top, all right? The CEO of your organization has to say this is important. The CPO, Chief Procurement Officer, can go off and do a lot on his or her own, but it has to be important to your organization. And that's real important because that gives you the wind, some more wind in your sails. Number one. Number two, you got to know what's in your numbers. You got to look deeply into your spend and say, who are these suppliers and where's your money going? There are categories. We're a pretty big company. There are categories where we do not have diverse suppliers, and we won't have diverse suppliers only because of the category itself. Not everyone makes compute servers, not everyone makes storage devices, not everyone builds buildings, but at the same time, there are many diverse suppliers that do a lot of other work that, and traditionally you see them in the real estate area in janitorial services and maintenance services. You see them in food service. You see them in other cleaning services, but you also see them in professional services. So Robin Washington, who's a board member, when the big banks were calling her, she would say, "Well, tell me about your diverse program and what's happening there." And I want to understand because I want to put my dollars in businesses that embrace diversity, big and small. So those are some of the things that folks can do. It's have a passion for it, be aware of it, and really think about moving the needle forward. And it's something to be proud of.
I love that. And I guess probably a bit of a curveball, and maybe we're crystal balling here, but coming back to the employees, right? You mentioned we're all working from home at the moment. Many of us are anyway across the world. And you've maybe lost connection to the office. Do you think that initiatives like this would help those employees and your team maybe to start with feel better about working at a company? And do you think this is ultimately where other companies will go?
Companies are people, right? We forget that, right? Without the people, unless you're a sole proprietorship, the company would not exist. And so culture, right, is the most important thing in a company. And we've talked about it. We talked about it with Lima last week. We talk about it all the time. And you think about, the Salesforce culture that is becoming more and more ubiquitous throughout companies as folks want to know what that secret sauce is. And I tell them, it's about the culture. And so now, working from home, the culture should not take a hit, right? But you say, how do we create just another little vector, just 2 degrees to the right of that culture, right? And so what does the work from home culture want to be? It needs to be inclusive. It needs to be collaborative. It needs to be connected from the employees themselves Yeah, I could sit and do some days sit in front of this screen from 7 in the morning till 9 or 10 at night. Not healthy, but my job requires that. Not every day, but a number of days. And make sure you're taking care of yourself. And from a leadership standpoint, make sure you know what's going on with your teams and you're helping your teams. If someone's having a bad time, you need to know that. And it may not come to you directly, it may come to you through some other way, but be sensitive to it.
Oh, well, I absolutely love that answer. And I think your notion there that we are all human, and even though you might be an employee, we're all humans, and even our stakeholders are all humans. So I absolutely love that advice. So Craig, I'm going to summarize your conversation with myself here as into a few key takeaways. I'm going to start off with, firstly, that at the end of the day, the world has pivoted. Maybe we might not go back exactly to how we all were working before, but I love that your spirit of innovation has continued. The work has to be done, better, never done, as we said. Second, that it is so important that you have diversity and inclusion top of mind, right? It is something that businesses can do, they should do, and it's absolutely in their power to do that. And you as executives listening in can make that change. And last but not least is that we are all human, and that at the end of the day, our employees need that connection and that sense of purpose. So Craig, thank you so much for everything today. This conversation has been very interesting and for sharing your perspectives with us all.
Leandro, it is great to see you. It's been far too long. There's like a continent and a massive ocean between us. We have to figure out how to bridge that divide. You know, Mini Craig, says good to see you as well, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much, Craig. Say goodbye to little Mini Craig there for me as well. That's definitely coming out later. I love it. I love it.
But this is all I got, and this thing is killing me. It's so hot.
Craig, I just want to say you're hired.
There you go. Thank you. It's a lot better than being fired, frankly.